Good day, gang. I hope you all are doing well. We've got the market coming up into some decent resistance here as we start our session. The Nasdaq's actually trying to do a kind of a steep 2T. Gold is at support. Show you guys what we got going on here. Here's gold. So it's already bounced off this level. We're already at 1509.5. So we're about halfway back up this last drop here. This is right at that 50% retracement on gold. So you can see the steep drop here and then the shift in momentum into that 50%. That's where we're at right now. And then on the ES, we're basically coming back into these lows from the congestion on the 60-minute time frame. It's about the 61.8% retracement. And Nasdaq is basically trying to do a momentum reversal plus. It's already pushed up just a little bit more here on this end and then started to pull back. So we're already starting to see a little bit of a reaction off of that as well here. It's kind of an overview of what we've got going right as we're starting our session. Let's flip on over here and I'll show you some more details. So here's our S&P 500. So you can see the 2T we've got trying here. Here's kind of that shift in the channel, two-wave correction, right smack into support, two-wave move up, little blurb. So we're at a really good level of resistance here. This should hold as we go into the afternoon. Gonna get things chopping up a little bit more here. The reaction off of the high so far, not that strong yet. It's kind of a weaker reaction off of that resistance. Not what we would usually want to see for a strong 2T reversal. So we need to see something that's going to try to shift that momentum a little bit better. The thing is, it's fighting that momentum on the time frame charts. So what we saw on that 60-minute ES was that it was straight up. So it is trying to deal with the exhaustion here while still fighting the momentum on here. So we do have really good resistance at this point. Can see it's coming up on that 61.8% of just this last drop here. And it's all this resistance from back in here too. So there's a little bit of room that we could even see this push up a little bit more before we get more reaction off of it. But this zone's a good one to start to see things kind of try to chop up a little bit again here. This is a pretty typical shorter term impulse move here. You can see some of the shorter ones, but we also see a lot of them that are bigger too, and that can sustain the momentum. So we're coming down off here as the start of the bigger channel, but there's definitely still more room it can go given the momentum. So it's kind of a tricky one right here. Gold is still pushing higher, coming off of that pivot support with a 50% retracement. We're just still seeing that pushing right now. Generally, when gold is pushing up, the markets are going to be trying to pull down. So that might get some of that momentum coming in a little bit better. Here you can see the 5-minute time frame. So what we're looking at is this trying to do, basically it's a steep, this is what we call a sharp or a steep 2T. So you've got the exhaustion, but it has a harder time fully turning over because the momentum is still stronger than average. So they can do little bursts up. We could even get it coming up into that full 61.8% retracement here before the afternoon is over. Basically, the rest of the day looks like could be a bit riskier given what we're seeing here. Hold on a second, guys. I'm in gold, so I'm trying to manage that position here too. Gotta move some executions. Okay. All right. So let's back this up a little bit. Look on some of the bigger time frames here. I'm gonna clear this actually. And there's not really much that has changed on our outlook on the indices on the larger time frame at this point. We still got this mess here going on at highs, shifting momentum, not really perfect for momentum reversal or a head and shoulders because this drop was so steep here. So what we need to see here is how does this react at this point? And given the current action in here, I am wondering if we are going to see this chopping around at the lower end here and breaking down as we head into the end of the year. Because of, yeah, you're thinking the same thing, Donna? Yeah. Because of the way this momentum has, had the really sharp move, had the really strong move, but then gave way to the really sharp move again. So we've got, steep, 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 steep. It's just showing me there's just not a lot going on as far as the bulls really being able to hold on to anything at this point. And even though we've got a really good bounce off of the lows here intraday, and momentum is pretty strong coming off of the lows here so far this week, this is oftentimes not a sustainable bounce that can break above previous highs. So kind of watching, see if this starts to shift in here around the midway point, could even come up to 61.8%, something like that, Maybe we could get some shallow avalanches starting to form, things like that. But basically, I'm going to be watching for reversals. Hey, look at that. Gold held right at that high I adjusted. I'll show you that here. Hold on just a second, you guys. Grab this. So here's where I went and took my gains off on that bounce there. Basically, this is just a pretty typical, you can see the momentum on this one is about the same, right? So you're coming into this breakdown zone. So that's what we're dealing with as that resistance right there on gold. On intraday timeframes, so we're going to be watching these this resistance as it comes into that 61.8%. See if momentum can shift. Probably can go up to the 76.4 eventually, but I'm going to be looking for a bit of a shift and maybe like a 2T type of thing going into that can flip things around again. Could get like a head and shoulders, 2T, but this is going to be pretty massive resistance as we go into next week. So that's the zone I'm looking to hold. I'm looking for things to slow as we hit the 61.8, shift into the 76.4, and then offer up short side setups again as we go into the early half of next week. Let's see here. I can't stop the yawning right now, you guys. Jeepers. I actually did sleep last night. Let's see. I'm going to pull up our Nasdaq. I know it's contagious. Let the Nasdaq pull up here. I'm going to show you guys the Russell. Russell's been a bit weaker today than the other indices. We've been seeing it continuing to hold good Fibonacci levels though. So we've got the extension up here, kind of a two-wave move, two-wave pullback into support. This is the same kind of support that 61.8% zone is going to be for resistance. Bit of a bounce. Megaphone. Posted this megaphone for you League of Trader folks. It's a really good example here. And then we got the two-wave move back down. Retest, second chance entry we've talked about in League of Traders. And now it's kind of just at a messy point here. I do still think this can push up a little bit more, just like the S&Ps are trying, but this zone here is going to be harder on this because the momentum is slower than on the downside here. So expect the Russell to have a little bit of a more difficult time as it pushes higher. Let's go look at our Nasdaq. Move this here so we can see this a little bit better. So Nasdaq here, this was a pretty normal, larger impulse move into this support. We did start to see an indication that this could have gained momentum there. We could have seen this go and do 1, 2, 3 and go a little bit faster. I believe I talked about this the other day in League of Traders. We didn't end up seeing that develop, but it had that potential because of the increase in momentum here. So sometimes you will see that happen, and basically how far this pulled out, that's kind of becomes your do or die point. You look at some of the other little, kneecap or correction type of zones. That's about how long it would hold before it would go. So actually a little bit longer there, like that is what you would have been looking for, like a little two-wave up in there and then the downside. Next resistance is here on gold, by the way, you guys. I'll show you that here too quick. I know I'm kind of going back and forth, but so here's a next resistance on gold. These that shift with the momentum here, like this on the lows, where you get your initial drop and a support and then it shifts farther, those tend to pick up momentum when they do a bounce. So that's what we're seeing here right now, is just trying to get that momentum picked up a little bit more. As gold goes up, usually we will see the indices go down, and oil is crashing. Let's just come into the lower end of megaphone. Let me pull that up for you. So here's oil. I've been playing oil mostly on the downside all day here. So here is, there's actually a little bitty momentum reversal right here. It's kind of hard to see it on the 150 tick, but there was a little bitty momentum reversal right there with the two waves up. So that actually triggered the first short, and then here's your avalanche. And right now we're right at next support level with the megaphone here. And it's coming into some Fibonacci support too. At basically it's the 100% retracement back to a low that's back here. Let me pull that up and show you guys the bigger picture here on oil. So here's the next support on oil. We're just seeing this hitting right now. There was another two wave up here that I shorted to at that point. And then this offered the next opportunity on this. This kind of tried to go for a 2T, but it was sort of messy. So like it shifted the momentum here, but it wasn't what we typically think of as a core 2T setup. meaning that what we would have expected for this to be a core 2T, gold actually did the same kind of situation, is it would go like this, and you'd have your measured move, and then you would get your short up there. So that was a little bit trickier to time that one when that actually went and got going. The second chance entry here was a little bit easier because it had a two-wave movement, but this was a little bit more difficult. Gold did the same thing on its when it reversed. It had that kind of sloppier start over here. You can see it kind of on the 100 tick. This is just the end of it. Let me show you it on the time frame chart. It was even worse on the time frame chart here. So we're seeing some of these slower, choppier starts here. So gold did the same thing. It tried to do that 2T. It hit the measured move here, then kind of got choppier, and it went with the megaphone instead of like a really clean 2T. So you've got 1, then we've got 2, 3, 4, 5. This is our megaphone that's forming here. So it eventually triggered with that. Here's the second chance entry, and that is what is held right now. So kind of some choppier action here as we started a lot of these reversals today. We're seeing the same type of thing here on the indices as they're trying to react to that resistance that I showed you guys. You guys hear me okay? Yep. All right. Jay, you must need to restart. I'll have her restart. Okay. Gold is holding that second resistance right there, by the way, right here. And oil is holding its low too, right here. So we're getting actually a decent little bounce there. It's coming back up into this Fibonacci 23.6% retracement. Let's look at the bigger time frames on gold and oil, you guys. See what we've got going on for the longer term outlook on these. So I'm going to pull up a monthly on gold first. As you know, I've been pretty bullish on gold on the monthly time frames, even though we were coming into some shorter term exhaustion. Actually, I'm going to add the fibs on here too. What you'll see when I pull up this gold on the monthly is that it did exactly what we just saw happening on that smaller chart. So here, see how it came down faster and then did that shift in momentum? It's about 50% of this move on the upside. That's basically just what it did on the intraday chart. And so we're at this 50% retracement of the drop right now. That's where we're seeing some of this resistance coming in. But because of the way this is rounding off, this still can keep going higher. It's not unusual for this to, go into some sort of correction here, but it might not even do a long correction. It might just do a 1, 2, 3 type of correction on that monthly time frame and keep going on that chart. So it definitely has that potential to do that. I'll show you the comparison here of that intraday. Look at, you can kind of see these. Let me kind of make this bigger. You can see them both in the room here, where here is the intraday and here's the monthly. So here's kind of that choppier start, then the shift in momentum. Here's the bounce here, a little bit better on the intraday. It's kind of picking up a little bit later here on the monthly, but same idea, same concept is at play on both of these, on how they're reacting off of these lows here. Yes, I am still bullish. Short term, I'm in corrective mode, but longer term, still bullish. Futures, we're seeing just kind of chopping around here at the highs. Again, it's dealing with that struggle that it's running into with having a 2T with a momentum reversal plus on the 1,000-tick chart, but then really sharp momentum on the time frame charts. So you can see here the 30-minute time frame on the Nasdaq. You don't even have a measured move yet on the 30-minute time frame. So what often happens here with this, let me put this on here. See how it's not up to that 100% or even close yet, even though the momentum is strong, it's only up to like about a 61.8% extension. What can happen here is that if it holds this zone, it goes into a correction here, it can go up and put in another wave on that larger time frame. So that can bring it into the bigger move. We can get that bigger move because it hit the 61.8%. So chances are it's going to try to go up to there, but we have that intraday correction to try to contend with. And so look, what we saw is it could shift it. It could do it with the 2T to go in there, and that would bring things in, or it could come up here and shift. And that could bring things in on that larger time frame. Do I see a further correction on gold? Let me go to smaller time frame here. On the daily chart, what I would watch for is an inverse head and shoulders. So daily here, what I'd be looking for is an inverse head and shoulders to see if that can bring that back up again and get strength coming back in. There is the potential it can go into a little bit longer of a correction. So basically this is our upside move. And so far we haven't even corrected about the same amount of time. So it could go into a longer base and try to do a little bit of a longer correction before it tries to continue. Usually I would like to see that 1-to-1 ratio on an inverse head and shoulders in here. So I would like to see it form like, let me clear that, like in here to really get going better. But there's just not the time development properly, proper time development. I'll spit that out. Proper time development here for that to happen. So what another option could be is it could do a kind of a momentum reversal type of move and then come up and pop up, and that would give it kind of the little bit of the longer time correction. Right now it's kind of iffy because your move up here is pretty strong compared to your move down. So usually this will have a harder time fully deciding which way it's going to go at that point. It can do a lot more of the back and forth. It can come back and retest it. It can go and do 1, 2, 3 up, or it can go and do that chop and do that shoulder and then try to go up. And all of those I've seen happen with pretty comparable regularity. If you go down to a smaller time frame, that can help guide you as to what's going on the smaller charts, on intraday charts, but the bigger time frame on this daily really has potential at this point to do any of those. So it's all going to be up onto that intraday momentum at this point. Futures here struggling with that high. They're just still combating that momentum issue. Let me pull up the larger time frames on oil for you guys. Oil just hit that 23.6% again, by the way. I mean, oil on the monthly is just, it's sitting there at lows. There's not really a good pattern formation. Why is my screen grabber not grabbing my screen? Snag it. Let's try this again. There we go. I'm going to put a couple of these time frames up here for you guys, because the weekly is interesting because it is suggestive of the potential that it can actually go into a 2B. So here's our monthly. Kind of mess, right? It's like, well, I don't know what to do. It has the same kind of idea as gold did, but a steeper version of it to the downside. So it kind of did that first little bounce, just like we saw on gold, kind of did the second little bounce, and then it just shifted momentum right at that resistance there and kind of crashed. Now it doesn't know what to do. So when we go down, look at a smaller time frame here, like the weekly, what we have is the possibility that this can go back into this low and do a 2B at that point. So that's the predominant pattern that I'm seeing right here. I had the nice two-wave correction. It's first support in here, but it definitely has that room to try to open up again and go and kind of keep going on the downside. It wouldn't even need to correct very long here. It could just do like a little tiny kneecap type of thing and keep going. We don't even have to see it do like a longer base or anything there. That's actually also part of the support here that stalled things just a couple minutes ago. You're just dealing with retest of this low here. I'm going to show you guys the 5-minute again so you can see how it reacted off of that previous intraday low again and how well these fib levels are holding. So really nice reaction there off of that. Good 20 ticks. $200 pop. Okay, let's see here. Question. If the overall economy is slowing going into next year, do you think that oil will continue to decline in price? I do, given the way it is acting right now. Now, the momentum coming out of that might shift, might slow. But overall, I am still anticipating that to try to head lower, at least into the end of the year. Now, next year, that's going to be more iffy because then you're backing up onto that monthly time frame, which really is kind of tricky here. There's not, so let's just say we get this 2B coming down into here, right? So it's kind of a retest zone of that previous low there. It's too fast to really break down to a major new low. What I usually want to see is a base out to about here for that to get going with a stronger sell-off, and I don't see that happening yet. Especially if it does that 2B, that could be even harder for that to do that. It would need to then go and like base here and do like a shallow avalanche in order to get stronger selling coming back in. And right now I just don't see a strong indication yet for that. We'll see how, momentum continues to shift over the next couple months. Right now, when you've got patterns like this, it's basically comes down to smaller time frame management, just like what we were seeing on the intraday charts of the indices here, because you just don't have a stronger bias on that larger time frame. We are still seeing the indices reacting to this high here. It's just not a sharp turnaround on the intraday charts here. So here's the 30-minute. You can see it's right up at that 61.8% retracement. When we go down to our tick charts, you can see that 2T, that steep 2T. See it better on even a 2-minute time frame here. So these are some that can do a flush higher. So when they do get going on the downside, you got to watch for things like a shallow avalanche to try to bring in stronger selling. Otherwise, it gets really tricky. This actually does have the potential for that shallow avalanche, because what it would need to do here, let me kind of open this up here. This is from our class in League of Traders the other day. It has the two-wave correction, right? So what we would need now is a two-wave move like this, and then that can bring in the stronger selling on this on the intraday. Especially since this pulled back further here. If it hadn't pulled back further, the odds would have been higher. It could have done an inverse head and shoulders for this afternoon and kind of done that extra flush, which was the threat when this started the 2T formation in the first place, because it hit with that sharper than average momentum. So it can do those flushes more easily on the upside. So this is a good example of where that smaller momentum shift is going to guide what happens. And right now, it's showing that it wants to do more of a shallow avalanche than anything else at this point. So what I would watch for is another correction. It might even come down slightly lower here and then correct. That kind of just throws people off, because what can happen is this low here can even break this low and still go into form a shallow avalanche. So it will look like this. We talked about this in the league the other day, but it can look like that and then like that. So it can even go to a slightly lower low there. So be aware that if that happens, that's not unusual. We see that happen all the time. Yeah, Lorena, basically what we're looking for is a lot of congestion into the end of the year and then further downside on the ES and the NQ. So we're kind of looking at the shorter term right now here intraday. But we're looking at, pushing a little bit higher on them and then falling off at that point. I'm going to go over and take a look at some of the other markets here. I'm going to pull up our Forex pairs. See, where did I hide them at? Here we go. So Eurodollar down at decent support here. Let me show you guys the larger time frame. So Eurodollar, what we've been playing around with is this trying to go and do a bigger breakdown on the weekly time frame is where we can see it particularly. So what I'm looking for still is back down at those previous lows. And we're at some short-term support, but that's just daily support in here. So what we would usually see is at this point, notice each of these little moves is about the same, and we are seeing them over and over and over again without a longer correction. So at this point, we would usually start to see either this go into a longer base or this pulls up in here and drops faster. We won't usually see this continue like this here. It's going to try to do one or the other. So right now it's kind of aiming more towards the sideways viewpoint. If this had had a slower overall correction like that, we would expect to see momentum come in and basically be a shallow avalanche type of idea that would bring that stronger momentum in. So I'm looking for opportunities for that stronger momentum to build. This bounce here was a little too fast. It kind of shifted momentum there intraday, a little too fast there. So we would need to see that base out and then do the breakdown. Right about here is going to be your next do or die point. So if it can base into that, that can bring in that stronger selling again. If it doesn't go at that point though, we're going to be looking for it to base out a little bit longer. So more like along the lines of this type of correction instead to get going. So I'm going to be watching here as we head into end of October, early November for a bigger breakdown pattern, as long as that goes into a choppier range here. And that's going to be the main one that I want to look for here on the Eurodollar. If it does anything like a phoenix, then that tells me it's going to go into a longer base first before it tries to break down again. So if it does like a little baby phoenix here, then that will usually bring it into a longer base before it would break lower. Aussie dollar, we've got a little bit of 2B action. Let's see here. Monthly, what it's doing is like what we saw in gold, but we don't have a buy set up yet for it. It might pull down into this low over here a little bit better before we see that happening. That makes sense since it tends to trade along with the euro. So has some more room, and then I would be looking for that to try to do a pop off of that support as long as it just keeps creeping here. Creeping is good for getting those rapid moves. What will usually happen with that is that you'll get the pop, you'll get a retest. So if you miss the first entry, it gives you a retest, and then you'll get the bigger, more rapid move off of it. So you'll have usually a couple chances. I know gold here on like the 30-second didn't have like the best second chance. Let me show you that. Since I'm referencing it, we'll go back and show you it. I'll show you here too. So what you can see here on gold on the weekly, this is a little bit more of an extreme one, is it breaks the channel, comes back, does a retest. This one it actually did 2 retests. Usually what you want to see is kind of more faster, and then it will go faster. And then the other one on gold intraday here, here's the break, and the retest didn't really come back into that zone as well. It did like just like a shallower move. Usually you'll get a little bit of a better retest and then it will go. So you do often have a second chance at it, but this shows you an example where you didn't. And part of that is because it just had this little better shift here at that low. So it had like a more solid setup for the break to begin with, and that kind of helped it get going. There were 2 little tests of the support. I know that because I took the second one on it, 30-second there. But that's basically the same idea. So watch for that on the Aussie dollar over the next couple months. There's my X. Dollar yen here. The gold is actually trying to do a 2-way push up. I want to show you that current 30-second because this can go for a 2T here into the afternoon. Had a nice little 2-way correction. Oops, wrong one. There we go. So this can go in and do a 2T into the afternoon. So just watch this. You won't see that momentum be steady like it is over here. look for the measured move zone, and that's going to be very strong resistance at that point. So something to watch for later. I don't know that we'll have time for it, but that can also help you say, if you see smaller little buy setups to pull you back up into that high too. I know we're going to be getting close to later in the afternoon for that, so it might not have a lot of room to do that. It would, well, it could do it around 1300. That's kind of enough time. 1300 Eastern. Dollar yen. Basically exactly the same as last week. We've got this, so these can do false breaks and then go the other way. Kind of like to see this maybe do like a two-wave move down like that and then give a move up. Let's see where the fans are on this. Okay, so you're going to want to watch it when it comes into that 76.4% fan. Notice it stalled right at the 61.8 this first time. Comes into that 76.4, that can give it that bounce. That's not really enough time to do that two waves though. Because ideally, if it could do like a two-wave move, that could get it going a little bit better because it makes it so that it has a two-wave correction on the bigger time frame. So it kind of gives it that stronger setup. If it falls steep into that 76.4, risk will be higher on a bounce. What you basically would want to see is for it to bounce and then go and do a retest for a stronger setup. It's just iffier action here on this monthly. Daily, kind of trying to do an inverse head and shoulders. You could probably even start to get some setups in here off the lower end, kind of the second chance entries. But then I would look for a baby inverse head and shoulder within this shoulder to give you a better confirmation. So this is your two-wave correction here. So that can go and do a shoulder over here and then pull back up into this zone here. So that would be the action I would watch for this month here on the dollar yen on just the short-term time frame. And then that bigger time frame, I'm gonna watch how the momentum plays on the daily time frame here because it's just too messy. Dollar Swiss is another one, just kind of blah. It's going to take off. It's just not sure which way it wants to do it yet. When it does go, it's going to go fast. So you will get a rapid impulse move. So those will be ones that you'll want to watch for second chance entries. So if it breaks, like let's say it breaks up here, comes back into here, that's actually your buy trigger again, and that could get that going strongly on the upside. And the same thing on the downside. It could flush like this, pop back up, and then do the continuation. Richard, the fib tools that are built into TradeStation are really good. I just use the ones that are built in. They're basically the same as what I have on that I had programmed for NinjaTrader. So there's not really a need to go and, add on a third-party one or anything like that. The loonie also a little bit more iffy right here. it's trying to do that head and shoulders, inverse head and shoulders with the cup, handle, trying to do head and shoulders. But like this, like we saw earlier, it's kind of short for a handle. And usually what I would expect, here's your upside move, right? You'd want about that measured move before you would get like your first continuation attempt, and it could even go out to twice that before it gets going. So my concern on this here with the loonie is that we could get some false starts, and then it could go into a longer correction, a longer base, and then go. And actually the way I just drew this out here is how that can look. Let me do it and highlight it. So it can go, it can pop, do a 2 back down, and then do that, and then go again. So you've got both of those options here for that to happen. Basically, this is your first zone. You would want to see it break. This would be your second zone. So it's also iffier on the monthly time frame. The daily, it actually kind of looks like we might get a little breakdown. Let's see here. Actually, weekly. Weekly has that second retest here, and then the second chance of that. So this is usually more likely to do an avalanche. It's a little bit early. We'd want another week or so, but that's the pattern that's currently forming here on the loonie on the daily time frame. And we actually just saw the same thing intraday on oil. It was one of my short triggers. Let me see if I can find the time frame that that was on. I remember this specifically because that pattern exactly triggered one of the shorts. It was at 11:16. Let me grab it. Same pattern, you guys, exactly the same pattern. It didn't trigger my short, it was my second add-in rather. Let me show that to you here. I knew I took a trade on it. Here it is. So I did the initial setup here and then added back in with the, had little like baby head and shoulders here. So this could have gone out a little bit further. It could have done like a 2-wave correction like that and gone again. In this context though, we've got basically a series of head and shoulders. That's why it played out here the way it did. So you've got the head and shoulders here, you've got the baby head and shoulders here, and then you got a baby head and shoulders here. But this whole idea is what we've got playing out here on US Canadian dollars. Well, just with this would have been the 2-wave correction. And then this is your retest zone here. So you're just looking for this to shift momentum to give that short. So basically what it looks like is you're looking at something that comes down strongly off highs, does some sort of move back up into those highs, comes back down again pretty well, shifts momentum, and then goes down. So that's what you're seeing. Do I recommend NinjaTrader? There's pros and cons to it. I find it's a little bit less stable than TradeStation tends to be. Some people do have problems with it, especially if they try to run too many screens. So it could be tied to like your internet situation. One thing you will notice is that if you have a ton of indicators that you leave on your charts when you close it and you go back to reopen it, it's going to take forever for it to load. So that can be a drawback. Basically, it has to go and put I do a lot of indicators that go across multiple charts. So that can be a drawback. Pros are I absolutely love the chart trading feature, and the charts themselves are beautiful. You've got to do add-ins if you want a lot of the Fibonacci tools. Richard, you gotta remind me of that like the end of the day someday. I've yeah, have I switched to TradeStation 10 yet? It's on my other computer, not this one. I've got I always keep forgetting. The only time I use TradeStation on this computer, you guys, is when I'm teaching. You guys basically forward focus. It's like the only time I'm using it. I do use NinjaTrader over here all the time, but not TradeStation. That's why some of my settings got changed and I haven't changed them back. Let's see here. Other things you guys want to look at. Roku, always right. Okay, so this had that really steep. I know I don't upgrade easily if it's working either. And the only reason I've got TradeStation 10 on the other one is because the other one was a newer computer. And that was the newest release when I did updates on the computer. Usually I stay like one behind until the new one has been out for a little while. So Roku, no shocker here, it did that larger crash and it did that series with the avalanche 1, 2, 3. So we're at the widening up zone here. So this can hold this for a little while on the daily and the weekly. You'll get those little bounces, you'll get some flushes back and forth. It's going to be more of a kind of a swing trading environment, more of the back and forth, a little bit better. Not quite as rapid on the weekly charts. You'll see it fall into more of these kind of more normative types of corrections over here. SHAK, is that Shockley? I don't know. I don't think I've traded that. Shake Shack. I don't think I have traded Shake Shack before. That is pretty exhausted. This is going to be a widening up zone here. This is pretty exhausted here. I wouldn't look for too much more on this. You've got the correction and then the 1, 2, 3 back up into here. So it might do like, you know, a little bit of an extra spike, but it's not guaranteed. It could just start out choppy like that and then pull back a little bit further like that. So I wouldn't look for too much more given what it is at. It's clearly, we've got a recent IPO here this year. Low support here, you might get like a swing trade type of action on the intraday. Well, not the best momentum reversal. Hold on. So when this comes in and you get the two-wave movement, if you get a momentum reversal in there, that can lead it to another multi-day move. But it's not a great momentum reversal. So watch and see if it can do a Phoenix instead. That can try to get that going. And what you would want to see on the Phoenix is you would want to see kind of a more shallow Phoenix and then momentum immediately pick up coming out of that. If it doesn't immediately pick up, then your risk is that it's going to end up breaking down again and do another low, coming back into 90 probably. It's not unusual on a correction like this. What happens is it can come in, it can slow into the support, but not quite hit where it really wants to go for support. It'll have a bounce, and then it will do that extra move back into the support, basically like what we saw happening on gold, you know, where it comes down first sharp, and then it shifts better into the support. Another way you can see that happening is it'll come down, it can do like a momentum reversal type of move, pop back up, take out this previous high, flush back down, and then reverse. So that is a normal thing to happen here too. So this could even flush down again and then reverse before you'll get a bit of a better bounce on that daily chart. Gold here is coming back up into that previous high, so it did that little baby correction and pulled back up. I would have preferred it to have done one single smooth move to get the 2T though. So it's not really doing that. McDonald's. Here you can see kind of one of those retests on McDonald's. This is a steep version. Daily chart. Two waves up. This often actually will try to come up back and close this gap. I would look for this to pull back up into this zone. I think if we can get like a, you might get like a tilted avalanche here on the daily chart, but I think this is still going to try to pull up into next week. Let's look at the bigger time frame on this. So bigger time frame, we've got that steep 2T type of thing. So it would be basically like a second chance type of entry on that 2T. This is a monthly. Let me show you the weekly. So here's where a typical 2T would start to form the reversal. And you can see we've got that shift in the momentum. So this can come back up into that zone and then get going. Got a nice measured move there. So I would look for a longer correction off this high though. I think it's going to hold this high on the weekly time frame here for a while. Probably another month or so or more. A couple months actually. I forgot this is a monthly, not a daily. You can see this correction here, how long this correction took in time, this correction, this correction. So those would be typical correction times, and it's going to depend on how fast this goes. But I would aim more for a correction that's like these in terms of time development. It's just probably going to be faster because each of these was a correction more over time. Even though this one started out with price, it ended up being more over time. So this time around, what we would expect is more of a correction through price. So if it does something twice in a row, like through time and then through time, next time around, it's going to do something different usually. So it would be more through price. So pulling up a little bit and then giving us some greater downside is what I would look for on that one. FRPT. FERPT. FERPT. Kind of messy looking avalanche attempt here on the daily. Weekly is not great positioning for it, which kind of goes along with it being messy. So this could go like this into 48, pop up again, do like a 2T, and then do a better reversal. Because you can see this is really strong here. So there's no real shift in momentum on the smaller time frame yet to give us a greater correction here. This had a bit of 2T action with a little blurb at the end there. Came back down into your S2 support with a nice two-wave drop, popping back up. So something that could flush out again, could bring in better selling again. But I would watch for that shift in momentum first. I don't think that we've got a really strong avalanche on this one right now on the smaller daily time frame yet, because see how that goes really sharp into this low right here, and then it goes to that lower low. We don't really want to see that. What we want to see is something that's a little bit steadier and then goes into a nice two-wave correction, and then that can drop. And in a situation like this where it goes flying really high, a shallow avalanche is actually a better scenario. So what that would look like would be, and it could do that, it could do it here. It would go like this, and then it would do a two-wave move. And sometimes it can be a hybrid between a 2T, a shallow avalanche, and a double top. So a shallow avalanche will hold the previous highs. You'll get the two-wave correction, and then you'll get the two-wave base. But it could go and push it, shift it just a little bit higher. Higher high would be a 2T. Same highs would be a double top. So basically a version of those, hybrid of those. Nasdaq's trying to do that shallow avalanche that we talked about an hour ago, actually, right now. Let's see if that can develop. Your entry point on this, it already has passed. But if you were paying attention to what we were talking about earlier, could have caught it. Your first entry point. Basically, you're at your first support, which is a do or die level here. So over here, we were talking about this going into a shallow avalanche, which meant the two-wave correction and then your two-wave bounce, okay? So this did a retest with actually a 2B in here. That kind of shifted this momentum up. Your typical entry on your shallow avalanche would be that channel break there. So the momentum shift kind of skewed things. What that can mean is that this can go out even longer before it tries to break. The momentum, again, is your issue. If the momentum doesn't hold right, then breakdown attempts like this can have a harder time following through. So even though we were looking for a shallow avalanche, what we would have wanted to have seen ideally right here is that it would have held this low, done a two-wave move up like that. Then there's your short. Could have done it part of a head and shoulders in there and broken down, or it could have just gone and gained momentum like that to the downside. That's what it would have looked like if it was a textbook. Instead, it had a little 2B in here. That shifted the momentum, allowed it to pop more so that when it came into the zone that it needed to hold for the shallow avalanche, it had a slower reaction off of it. So that's what we're getting, this struggle going in here. And of course, this is still fighting that time frame momentum, you guys. So that is an issue here as well. It is fighting the 30 and 60-minute time frames that want to push higher because of that momentum. So that's why we're seeing, you know, it had the ideal situation here on the intraday, on the tick chart for a shallow avalanche, but it's struggling to actually get it going further than this previous low here. Even though everything else was kind of lining up, you can see how that larger time frame has impacted the momentum on the development of the pattern. And actually, this is one I'm probably going to try to do a screenshot of later so I can keep it for our classes, for our shallow avalanche classes. Let me grab I'm actually going to grab a current screenshot of this here too. And this is one you guys can keep too for yourselves, especially watch it as it plays out too. It's a good study. Let's see what time frame that I had that on. I think it was a 300 tick chart. Where's my 300 tick chart hiding? There it is. So what I'm going to do is do a screenshot of this and save it. I'll post it in the room too for you guys in the forum. aka M. Yeah, it's really important when you're looking at patterns, not just to look and keep a book that shows your patterns that work perfectly, but also show when they don't work. And then go back on your chart and mark, hey, you know what? These are the little things that happened in here. These are the cons. And you might not even see that if you're just looking at a 300 tick chart. You might not see a con. So that can be problematic when you're wondering, hey, why didn't this work? Well, your king and your queen weren't working together. Your trend placement and your momentum, not all working together. AKA M, good exhaustion forming. It's about at 100% extension, I'm guessing. A little bit shy. So this can continue to shift a little bit momentum as it comes up into that. Momentum is about the same as over here, so it can still go up and get to that 96 level. Daily chart is, it could definitely get up to that 96. It might flush again first because you already have one move down and you've got two highs here. I know it's kind of hard to see that, but here's your move down and then here's your two highs. So that can do a little baby flush in there, but then it could still come up and push up into that 96 on that bigger time frame. Just don't be surprised if it flushes first. All right, you guys, I'm gonna wrap this on up and head on out. And I will see you all next week. So have a wonderful weekend, everyone. You are very welcome. I'll see you League of Traders on Monday.